Out of camera. All right, cool.
You good now?
Yeah, let me put my phone on silent.
There you go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 12 of the Dynasty Fantasy Football Central podcast. I'm Michael Moore. He's Jonathan Scott. Say hello, Jonathan.
Hey, everybody.
It's been a while, Jonathan, but I think now's as good a time as ever with week one in the books, and with week two, oh gosh, about 45 minutes away, something like that.
Yeah, roughly.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think there's a lot to cover. I mean, all the off-season pontificating and theorizing is sort of now being put into practice. So we can cover a lot of stuff. Probably not everything because there's only 24 hours in a day, but we'll do our best. I think we're going to do the first of our initial series, the 3x3. We look at 3 stories from last week, Dynasty-wise, and then 3 stories for the upcoming week, Dynasty-wise. Because I think those can be counted as different. I mean, there's obviously game results to pour over, but there's also stuff to look ahead towards. So, and it just sounds easier to say 3x3 instead of generic Dynasty podcast. So, Jonathan, without further ado, what do we have as far as week one is concerned?
Well, there's a few things, but I think we'll start with something that you're fond of, or someone, I guess, and Kelvin Benjamin. Flat out, I mean, it's kind of surprising to me that he did not only that he did well for his skill set and talent, but he did well with Derek Anderson as his quarterback. Last minute switch from Cam Newton, which as a Newton owner, I was actually happy they held him out. I thought that was the right thing to do. I don't want this guy going out playing a week one game and getting his ribs shattered. But I was more skeptical of Benjamin, and you were too, for other, I'll call them ridiculous reasons, which are fun to go into. We'll go to them later. But and then you drafted him anyway in one of the dynasty leagues you're in.
It was a second-round pick.
Whatever. And now it looks like you're going to reap the benefits of someone that has offensive rookie of the year possibility because they're going to force feed him the ball, man. The one thing I look for in week one when it comes to rookie offensive players is, does it look like they built a game plan around him? And him, along with also Brandon Cooks being the other one, it looks like they built a game plan around him. And if you're a Benjamin owner right now, you're going to be really encouraged at that. The Panthers have said, all right, well, you're very raw, you're 24, you don't really know what you're doing yet, but you're our guy, here you go.
Yeah, I would like to claim that I knew this was going to happen all along, but I can't. I mean, I wasn't a fan in the beginning of the preseason and even off-season, but, the training camp, I think, showed a lot. I mean, look, you can live or die by the training camp reports, right? Meaning, it's very easy to say a guy, oh, he's dropping like half his passes in practice, or no, he's catching like everything in sight. I mean, careers can be made by those assessments. So, yeah, and Benjamin had a really good preseason and a really good training camp. And yeah, like you said, there's just no one else, quite honestly, there to to catch the ball. So, yeah, I was pleasantly surprised. Now, the big question is going to be, our defense is going to hone in on him because he is one of the only playmaking threats they have. And I think it's possible, but look, you could even argue that they did in week one because, let's face it, it's not like they got a whole lot of other talent around him anyway. And he still succeeded. I mean, he had 6 catches for 90 yards and a touchdown that was pretty impressive, quite honestly. It wasn't like he was open. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I think, so to that point, I think they will game plan around him a little more, but I think the thing you can't take away are going to be his touchdowns and his red zone opportunities. I mean, you can game plan as much as you want to within the field and roll a safety over to coverage and have that over-the-top help, but you can't have over-the-top help when you're snapping the ball from the 6-yard line, right? So, and I think there's a little bit of respite with Greg Olsen on that team, and I don't think I'll be interested to see how they use those two in tandem, right? Because I think that Kelvin Benjamin would benefit most from having Olsen on the same side of the field as him. But at the same time, just tactically, if that happens, then as a defensive coordinator, I will completely ignore the other side of the field.
Right.
I won't even need to pay attention to that. So I don't know that he's going to be able to have that happen to him. I think he's going to have half the field to himself, and he's going to have to learn quickly. The other thing to look for is that we really don't know what his chemistry is with Cam Newton because they haven't played together yet. So, it can't be any worse than it was with Derek Anderson, who I'm sure he's never played with before either. But, it's just one of those things you hope comes along quickly. With bigger targets, I feel like it's easier to get that chemistry because you can throw it within a general area. And it's not like he's trying to burn guys 60 yards downfield. You got to get his steps right on a 75-yard pass. So, a surprisingly good week for him. I'm surprisingly higher on him than I was beginning of the year. That's an interesting team, by the way. That's a really interesting team now that the offense might be like at least top 20. It might be functional.
I think it is. I mean, look, I'm not going to go out and say Benjamin's already better than Steve Smith was last year, but let's put it this way. I think the receiving core in Carolina, top to bottom, is probably better this year than last year. Wouldn't you say?
Not at all.
Well, okay. Who did they have last year? They had Ted Ginn. Look, I'm not saying they're good. I'm just saying it was better than last year.
That's fine to make fun of that, but they all Armonte Edwards was a part of it. Brandon LaFell was a part of it. Like they had
awful.
They're better than Jason Avant and Jericho Cotchery. Like
I don't know.
That's not even a question. Like those guys are better than that because they're more dynamic, they're more multiple, they can do more things, right? Like at least the threat of being able to run 40 yards in under 5 seconds was there with your receiving core last year.
I guess, but I'm not. Look, okay. At the very least, we could say it was a wash. Is that fair?
No, but we're rabbit holing. Look, if I'm building an offense and I want complements around them that can help them out, Jericho Cotchery and Jason Avant are doing nothing to help Kelvin Benjamin out. By the way, I'd say they're taking away from Greg Olsen. So at least before, you could clear out sides of the field with Edwards, who is fast, and LaFell, who is decently fast, and you can let Olsen operate underneath. Now you have basically 3.5 guys, because Benjamin's not a burner, who all want to work underneath. Like, how is that better?
Look, all I'm saying is, and look, I don't think you can discount, quite honestly, Jericho Cotchery. I think he's okay. I mean, hell, he was a top 30 fantasy receiver last year. And yes, I know it's because of the offense, not because of him. But to me, it's a wash as far as the receiving core. So, so you bring up how good are they going to be, and you got to look at what the differences are from last year to this year, right? So the receiving core is completely remade, and we're going to disagree on this, but I think it's at least even. You have Jonathan Stewart, which I think might be a difference only because he wasn't there last year, right?
Sure. I don't know what he brings. I mean, yeah, he's there. He's a physical entity that will be on their football team.
Sure. Well, and honestly, I think it. How do I want to say this? I think it's very underrated to have some consistency, right? Some continuity. Like, what was the biggest complaint for you and I for Alex Smith and the 49ers? It was he had a different offensive coordinator 3 years in a row.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
So, look, I'm not saying it's a huge difference, but I think it definitely makes things easier, right? I mean, Cam Newton's in the same offense for the second year in a row with arguably better players, or at least the very same players. So, I don't know. For dynasty purposes, yeah, I'm high on Benjamin now, and yes, I do own him in a league or two, so there's a reason, but I think there's a lot to like, personally, and he's tied to a good quarterback.
I think there's a lot to like going forward. I don't know that you're going to have – I think what you saw this week may be the pinnacle of what he does on a weekly basis, but I think going forward, once they diversify the offense again and they're able to go draft another receiver that can stretch the field, maybe draft someone more dynamic on the other side, you're going to see a much larger playbook, and they're going to get more space for him to operate in. So I don't know if the Colston comparison's been made, but someone that maybe a slightly faster Marcus Colston is a good comparison of someone like I could see that being his career essentially.
Sure, and you know what? I would agree with the fact that 6 for 90 and a touchdown is probably what he's going to top out at on a weekly basis this year. I would agree with that. Yeah. I don't think you can expect a whole lot more than that. Now, if he did that every single week, that'd be great.
I think you're going to see consistency there because there has to be, right? Like they don't have another option. So.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm taking a sip. So what's our next topic?
You are. Good for you. Well, the next, Jerry boys. All right, the Dallas Cowboys. We watched just about every snap of this game because of where we live and because they were playing our favorite team. And I'll say going into this game, I think you and I were actually fairly high, fantasy-wise, on this offense in totality, right? Like, we both
Oh,
kind of liked them
completely.
quite a bit.
Completely. I would say we had a higher opinion of Tony Romo and everyone on that offense than even Cowboy fans.
Oh, well, yeah, but they're all team. So,
Well,
um, sorry, not sorry. That's how that works.
yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, like so we were pretty high on them. Now, I'm not someone that typically does a complete 180 after 1 week unless there's something jarring that I've seen, and I'm just going to say that in week 1 there were some jarring things that I saw. Right? Like I think if you're a DeMarco Murray owner now and going forward, I think you want to have him for the next 2 to 3 years. I think he's going to be awesome. Even when they were down 20 points, they were still running, and they were running at a good clip. He was averaging for most of the game about 6.5 a carry against a run defense that I think is really overrated and has been on the decline for years, but it still is not bad.
Well, and let's face it, the Dallas offensive line, at least for the running game, is pretty good. It's not bad.
Not pretty good. I think they're a top 2 or 3 unit in the league.
Yeah.
I think that offensive line can just mash people.
Yeah. Which I think was part of the reason why we thought Tony Romo would be again a top 7 quarterback option, right?
Yeah, because what's funny is I thought, and we're gonna go. So there's two plays ironically that worry me. The reason I thought that is because Tony Romo in a Scott Linehan offense, you can run the ball, 2 tight end set, play action, turn around 2 to 3 reads at most on a play action pass, limiting his ability to, I don't think he makes mistakes as often as other people do, but you limit the mistakes and the reads available to him, right? So, and Troy Aikman did a good job of this during the first interception, and the second one was just easy to see. He just kind of said, "F it, I'm throwing it up there," and he threw it.
I just think it's funny that we're saying like, oh, in the first interception there was this, and the second there was that, and the third there was that.
So I'm not even going to talk.
I'm sorry, continue.
It's all right. But those 2 interceptions, the one that Cox picks off that was down the middle late, and the first one, which should have been down the middle, wide open, Terrence Williams is running right down the middle of the field, and he comes short to Des Bryant. Those were both play-action plays with only 2 to 3 reads at most to make, and he still made the wrong reads. That, right. Like I would like to chalk that up to just not playing in the preseason, coming off back surgery, etc. He also didn't look right as far as full mobility and full agility. He still did some funny, quirky things in the pocket, but it looked like everything was a bit slower. So I would keep an eye on this, especially this year. If he has a couple good 3 or 4 games and you have somebody wanting to trade for him for a stretch run and you can get a high pick for next year, I thought he had 3 to 4 good years left. I'm starting to waver on that a little bit. I wonder how much, because Linehan's going to get fired again this year, and he'll have a new offensive coordinator again. He might have a new coach. He might have more injury issues, and I'm starting to look around thinking, man, if they go 4-12 again, which it looks like they're going to, this could all get real ugly real quick for Tony Romo.
Yeah, I would agree. He just didn't look right, quite honestly. And I was stunned because, I mean, going into the season, I would have loved to have Tony Romo. Like if you're in a 2-quarterback league and Romo's your second quarterback, which was very possible, I would have loved that, right? And, he's 34, but you also have a lot of quarterbacks. Quarterback, let's face it, is a position where you can be older and it'll be okay. Yeah. Like Peyton's 37. I think Drew Brees is 35. It's okay if you're older, but man, he looked bad. He just looked really bad. The whole offense did. I mean, and it was real. And what's more disappointing is, and I'd have to really look at like tape and stuff, but it seemed like, he was really trying to force it into Dez. Which, look, if you're a Dez owner, you love, but it just wasn't happening. I mean, Jason Witten had a really bad game because, for some reason, Tony Romo wasn't looking for him.
Well, so there's some things that go into that, right? So part of it is if you do go more play action heavy, that you're going to have 2 tight ends and they're going to be in blocking more often. I don't know that that's necessarily a good plan, but that's what's going to happen. And I'm not saying it happens the entire time, and we'd have to go back and look at it, and we haven't done that. But I'd say there's 3 to 5 snaps a game where he was in line blocking, where in the past he wouldn't have been doing that. Right. I also think that he did, that one interception where Des Bryant got destroyed and Williams was open on the seam.
That just looked painful too.
You saw the on Twitter after the him like just spread out like a cross. That was pretty funny. Because he did. He got destroyed. But another one, like you said, that like the other one was a play action where he rolled out, had at least 5 or 6 seconds to throw, and you could literally see the time in his head where he was like, fuck it, and just threw it up for grabs to Dez, which is okay in some instances, but not when the play's already broken down.
Well, that and look, you got to have a pretty good arm to be able to pull that off.
Yeah.
Right? And for some reason, he just looked like he had a dead arm, man. Quite honestly. I mean,
well, I can tell you why.
Because of back surgery?
Yeah, his core, his legs and his core aren't back to where they need to be.
Sure.
And that's what I was saying about the mobility in the pocket. Like he was trying to move quickly, and you could tell he was trying to burst and to do these short area moves, and it was more just like Jello falling out of a bowl, where it just kind of like it all just kind of happened eventually.
Yeah, God, this would be, if I felt good about Romo, it would be a perfect, like, buy low situation, right? Meaning, like, oh, he looked horrible. You should definitely go after him. But he's 34, and quite honestly, I don't know that Jerry wouldn't pull some stunt in the offseason for a quarterback. I mean, look, if they get a top 5 pick, who's to say they won't take, like, Mariota or Hundley or, Style or whatever, or Petty or whatever. Right?
Especially if there's a new head coach. Like the contract, and I don't want to get into because that's just complicated, but the contract makes it to where even if they get a new quarterback, Romo has to be on the team next year. He's going to be there. But the writing could be on the wall, and there could be a situation where he's just holding a place for a rookie. And I don't blame you at all.
Right. And you and I talked about this. How mad is Jerry that he got essentially, like, voted down on the Johnny Manziel pick? Because quite honestly, it's looking like Jerry was right now.
I'm not going to say it's right because we don't know if he's any good, but I will say you have to look at that and think, man, like we're going to need a quarterback next year, and there's no one as the owner that I'm going to love more than that kid.
Right. Right.
No, it doesn't mean he knows best.
But with Manziel in Dallas, there would have been, I don't know, a 3-year grace period before anyone would have said anything. Right?
No. Really? You think so?
Yeah. I think they would have loved him that much that he would have had such a long leash it wouldn't have been funny. I really do.
Maybe. I mean,
Okay, so here's the bottom line. Let's look at the dynasty outlook for everyone involved.
Yeah.
Tony Romo, and we'll cover this later because we're going to cover the quarterback rankings, but I think right now, if I were to look at it, he's like 13 or 14. No, he's 12. Ahead of guys like Brady, Cutler, Tannehill, Rivers, Bridgewater. I don't know. Where are you putting him? Are you selling? I mean, is he better than those guys right now, dynasty-wise?
Wow. So we'll get into this a little bit later to the other part of the 3x3. I would probably still have Romo ahead of Brady. I would have him ahead of Tannehill. I would not have him ahead of Rivers or Bridgewater, though. I will take Psycho Face Phillip Rivers and Teddy Bridgewater moving forward over Tony Romo because I think Bridgewater is that good. And that offense, we're not going to talk about it that much, but that offense looks like it has the potential to be dynamic. Minnesota fans should be excited about this year and the future. And Phillip Rivers, I think this year and going forward, has an offensive philosophy and stability that Tony Romo just doesn't have. So,
right. Well, and look, and we talked about this offline just before this, but there's something to be said about winning now and what someone can do for you now. But in this case, I would be scared if Romo were my guy. I really would.
I would too, but I think you could farm him after like 2 good weeks. I think you could flip him for someone that's wanting to trade like a Phillip Rivers because Rivers had a not great game against Arizona. He's about to play Seattle this week, which isn't conducive to big numbers for quarterbacks. And then maybe panic on him a little. I know Dynasty's a long-term view, but people don't have that a lot because, like you said, the immediacy of a win now holds value versus the win of a future game. And it's just, I think you could see some kind of trade like that where it's an incremental value to you, that it's an incremental upgrade, not big, but it's still an upgrade. And that's something you could see happen in the first 3 or 4 weeks. Right.
Well, and so quickly, because we got to move on, but quickly, so Dez Bryant, does this change your opinion about him, or is he still, top 3 dynasty receiver?
No, he's still top 3 guy.
Yeah,
I don't see how
I
he's
would
not.
agree. And honestly, well, and this is going to sound funny. Before game one, before week one, I probably had him ahead of Calvin Johnson as far as dynasty goes. Um, I'd probably switch that. Probably not. Now, he's still two for me, quite honestly, because
Whatever.
like Calvin, he is the top option in a very high octane offense, or at least in an offense that intends to pass a lot, right? And he is just a freak of nature. I mean,
Sure.
both of them are, quite honestly. So now, Jason Witten, you and I have different, I think, different opinions on him. Um, where does he stand for you then? Is he a starter in dynasty leagues, or is he more of a backup at this point?
Well, so I have a dearth of good quality starting tight ends in fantasy. If you're in a 12-team league or more, like so to say he's a backup would be a bit disingenuous. But I think, I mean, look, he's going to get less snaps. He's going to get less opportunities to go out and run routes. Um, and looking at that offense, he's going to be the sole dependent person who they ask to get underneath stuff, right? There's no one else. We talk about balance within an offense. It looks like now they have two receivers that want to do nothing but run really fast and really far and catch bombs. But Des Bryant being the exception, he will go over the middle a little bit. But I think we've talked about this. I think this is the last year you will see something close to a starting receiver or starting tight end production as Jason Witten. Last week was not a good indicator of how he'll be using the offense. It was a bad week against a linebacker in Patrick Willis and even Michael Wilhoit, who's pretty underrated to the average public, of being able to blanket him and do things with him that other linebackers, especially in the East, can't do. But I don't know how much longer he's got, man. I really don't.
Well, and I'd probably agree with that. I mean, I think you and I think, had different opinions going into the season. I mean, I think, probably higher on Witten than you. And look, I give you credit. You called it, but yeah, after week one, I mean, oh God, it's just I don't know. The whole offense honestly looks old, quite honestly. So, and I'm with you. If DeMarco Murray is, let's put it this way, if he's your top running back maybe, and you're loaded at every other position, I think you're probably okay. He's way better suited. If he's your running back too, I think you're golden, quite honestly. And I think, he's underrated as far as a running back in fantasy football goes. He doesn't get enough credit, quite honestly. And I think, if he's your running back too and you're good at every other position, you're solid, man.
Yeah,
I would be thrilled with that.
He's someone that for his career has averaged 5 yards a carry. And
Right.
by the way, he has very good hands out of the backfield too. You don't have to take him off the field. Injuries will always be a concern. I get that. So make him your running back too. But if someone is down on him just because he's a Cowboy or because he gets hurt, I think that's foolish, and I think you can go get him for a good price.
Oh yeah. No, I agree.
So.
All right. What's the third week one topic we're covering?
Throwing a little shine to Arizona, man. So not someone we're fond of, but I'm going to eat a little crow on this. I kind of thought Bruce Arians was a moron as a head coach. I didn't think he'd be good.
Really?
Yeah.
Really? Even though he had essentially like an internship with the Colts for like half a year, if not the whole year.
I mean, this goes back to the idea, like, if you're Peyton Manning's backup or Tom Brady's backup, you just learn through osmosis. Like, that's not how this works. Like, just because you were a coach and awesome...
But he actually coached. It wasn't like Ryan Mallett, who's never started a game.
No, I get that. If we're basing entire careers off of, like, 12-game sample sizes, I mean, Jim Caldwell never would have been out of a job. But he was. So, and he played, like, he coached and got a team to 10 wins in an awful division. Awful division. Except, like, look, I'm not going to get into this. I just didn't have a whole lot of hope for him in the offense he wanted to implement with the quarterback he chose and the personnel they had there. Okay? That's what it boils down to. He went to a team that was playing in the toughest division in football with Larry Fitzgerald and a rookie in Michael Floyd, who wasn't very good, a running back situation that wasn't settled at all, and he decided he wanted to choose Carson Palmer as his guy to run this downfield offense. And the offensive line still isn't great, and I was like, holy shit, he's going to get killed. And The one thing I'll say about this, there are a few things that I didn't really remember, but Carson Palmer is a tough son of a bitch, man. I forgot, like, watching him in Cincy back in the day before he tore up his knee. That dude was tough. Like, there were numerous times where he came off the field, like, bloodied, broken jaw, etc., goes back in there.
Well,
like, him getting killed isn't a big deal. And he's actually really good at the offense they want to run.
Well, and it goes back to, just because there's 32 teams doesn't mean there's 32 guys who can, like, start in the NFL, right?
Yeah.
But Carson Palmer, I think, has proven he is one of them. He's not going to be elite. He's not going to be a Manning or a Breeze or anything. But, look, is he competent enough to run an offense? I think he's proven that. And given, for dynasty purposes, no, he's, like, radioactive. But for the guys around him, is he good? I think he is. He's not bad. Look, Floyd had a night that everyone was expecting. He had 100 yards. I mean, he did what he was supposed to do.
Yeah.
Fitzgerald, look, I'm a Fitzgerald owner. He's done. He's done.
No, he's not.
I don't understand. Like, the guy I do the podcast with for Pro Football Focus, Scott Spratt, he loves Fitzgerald too, and I don't get it. I really don't.
I don't love him, but understand in the last 30 minutes, you've thrown shine to Jericho Cotchery and Jason Avant throwing shade on Larry Fitzgerald.
I get that. Look,
man.
Listen to me. In a vacuum, is Larry Fitzgerald better than Jericho Cotchery all day? But but you have to take into account the coaching, the scheme, all that stuff. And for whatever reason, and don't get me wrong, I'm not one of those contract truthers who's like, oh, they're not going to throw it to him because they don't want to pay him. I don't believe that at all. I just think they have better players around him, and they want to mix it up a little bit, right?
Sure.
So Floyd is the number one guy there now. Can we agree on that?
I agree on that. But where it gets a little nuanced is Andre Ellington is the number one running back, and he's already hurt.
Well,
They have an offensive line that can't run block and is better at pass blocking than run blocking.
And all of that was evident Monday, yet he got one reception.
I understand. What? I get that.
So, look, all I'm saying is I got him right now pretty much as a wide receiver 3. I would consider Edelman above him as far as, like, my personal team goes.
All right. That's fine.
But do I think he's anything higher than that right now? No, because you can't count on him week to week. You just can't. Is he still a good player? I'm not doubting his ability. Like, he's still a great player, and he's still Hall of Fame borderline-esque, but for fantasy purposes, would you really roll with him as your wide receiver 2, honestly, in any format?
Yeah, I would. I wouldn't have an issue.
Really?
Yeah.
I would not, man. I really wouldn't.
That's fine. I mean, so the difference is that you and I are looking at things that at a different rate, right? So he's still a monster in the red zone. Like, he still is a giant red zone threat, and he even had 10 TDs last year, and his targets went down, etc. I get that. I think the emergence of Michael Floyd helps him a little bit. Like, I think being able to, he's going to see single coverage now, and he hasn't had that before ever. Not even last year. Last year he was a guy getting doubled constantly. The other thing is I don't see anything physically wrong with him. There was nothing wrong with him to the point where I thought, man, he doesn't look good. He's lost his step, etc. He looks the same as he did last year, and I tend to think he'll get more targets this year than last year, maybe like 20 or 25 or so, because they're going to have to throw the ball more because Ellington's going to get hurt and Jonathan Dwyer's not a real thing that should ever happen. So I also think they're going to be way worse than they were last year. They're going to be throwing a lot more than they were last year. They had the luxury of having an awesome defense that kept games close to where they could have a balanced offense. They're missing 6 starters on defense. It'll be 5 once Tyrann Mathieu comes back. I get that. But they're going to be down a ton. So I tend to think if he's now look, this may be his last year of that, but if he put up about, 85, 1,100, and 7 TDs, I wouldn't be shocked at all. I mean, he had 80 catches last year, man. And yards were down. I totally understand that. But he's going to get touchdowns. He's going to get receptions. The yards are going to vary. It's that simple. He doesn't bother me as a wide receiver, too, to be honest.
Oh, man. That's very interesting.
I get it. But I would trust him for good years.
Yeah, Oh man, I think it probably depends on where you view him, right? Meaning, because he's squarely on that fence of wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, right?
Correct.
Um, and I think a lot of people could be burned if he's your wide receiver 2. Quite honestly, I could probably name 24 receivers in Dynasty anyway that I would have above him. Which I know sounds crazy, but I think I could probably do it, especially at that position where there's just a ton of receivers. You know.
Sure. Um, so I would say the way to look at this is to see if you see a bunch of targets going John Brown's way, because the other people on that offense are Ted Ginn, who's not good, John Carlson, who's not good, Rob Halsler, who's not good. The only threat to take away targets there is John Brown, and John Brown got a decent amount of targets last week, so that would be the thing to look at going forward. The contract thing is interesting. Larry Fitzgerald has already spoken in public. He's like, "Look, I'm not an idiot. You can't pay someone $23 million in the cap." And you can't do that. He knows it's coming. So I don't think there's a lot of animosity there. Even though his dad spoke out about it in the press a couple days ago, which, but I think for this year for this year alone, if he was your 2, but you had someone that could slide into a 2 next year, like a Marcus Wheaton or maybe a Montavious Bryant or whoever. That was really Pittsburgh centric there, but anyway, I think that plan going forward isn't that bad.
All right. Well, we disagree, I think, and that's okay.
Pretty evident.
That's okay. All right. So that was week 1. Let's move on to week 2. There's a couple things to watch out for dynasty-wise. What is first on our agenda, Jonathan?
So I think I think that this is what I chose as the most exciting thing to look forward in week 2, and it's because I watched about 95% of this game because I owned half the people in this damn game. But the Falcons, going forward, they played a Saints defense last week that we thought was going to be very good. They weren't. The secondary was borderline abysmal, and they had issues like the Saints. I actually recorded that game and went back and watched it later just because I wanted to see a few things. I own Brandon Cooks, Roddy White, Mark Ingram. I own a ton of people in that game, so I wanted to go back and look at some things. The Saints safeties were lined up 25 yards off both of them off the line of scrimmage. Their slot corners were lined up 15 yards off slot receivers. Anybody wanted a free run for 10 or 15 yards in the Falcons offense, they got it. And so you're giving all these elite athletes like Roddy White, who looked like the old Roddy White, like nothing ever happened. Julio Jones, who also looked very good. Harry Douglas has had no drop-off from last year, which is shocking to me, to be honest. But they all got free releases to run as much as they wanted to. The other thing that's very, very encouraging, as long as he's healthy, is that Jake Matthews is kind of a beast.
I'll look up his injury status real quick. You keep talking.
Please do, because if he's able to play and replace Sam Baker at left tackle, you get what I think is you replace a replacement level player or below replacement level player with what I think would be a Pro Bowler this year at left tackle, which has been the problem area for them for God knows how long. Even though they drafted Baker in the first, gave him an extension, etc., he's never been that great. He's been fine enough. And so Matt Ryan looked really comfortable with Jake Matthews at left tackle. He was able to step up in the pocket quite a bit because Matthews constantly got his guy past Ryan. And there was no pressure coming up the middle from the Saints, which is why I say look this week when they play the Bengals, who have this guy named Geno Atkins, who is known for constantly putting pressure up the middle. When they like to blitz, they like to blitz from the inside because their middle linebackers can't really cover in space. They're going to go heavy at that A-gap of the Falcons. So if they can still sustain that kind of pass protection and Matt Ryan is able to step up and make these throws, the rush from the outside going forward is not going to come, and I think the Falcons can actually maintain not 440-yard passing games. They're going to look like the Falcons from 2 or 3 were able to stop them. Merging. I didn't see that coming either. I thought that they were going to have a lot of problems.
Yeah, I'd agree with all that, I think. I really think the offense, look, even a couple years ago, it's not like their offensive line was drastically different as far as personnel was when they went to the NFC Championship game than it was last year, right?
Off the top of my head, I don't think so. I have to think
Right.
about it. The right tackle, who I can't off the top of my head remember like right now, they're right. They went, I think, to their fourth right tackle last year by the middle of the season because of
That,
injuries and ineffectiveness.
that's fine, but look, Roddy
It's
White
an issue.
and Julio Jones were injured for a long time last year.
Correct.
And let's
Yeah.
face it, that's what caused them to not perform as well. I mean, that's just a fact. Julio Jones is a beast. Believe me, Julio Jones for me is probably 3 or 4 as far as dynasty receivers go. So to have a guy like that out, I mean, it'd be like taking away AJ Green from Cincinnati, quite honestly. I mean, they're just not the same. So to have all those guys healthy for one game anyway, I think was a big difference. And look, I'm hesitant if they can continue that when they're not at home on turf and all that stuff. But look, I think the offense is going to be good. The defense, no, they're not good. Let's face it. I mean, look, they gave up 34 points, and look, and it's to the Saints. I get that, but it's not like the defense is going to be a lot better than it was last year. But that offense, as long as everyone's healthy, to me is a top 5 offense. Is that crazy?
No, not at all. Because it looks like the running back, they're going to do a running back by committee scenario, and the running backs at whole average like 4.5, almost 5 yards a carry. So they'll be balanced if they wanted. They actually are going to resemble, I think, what you see or have seen out of the Saints offense the last few years, where they use the pass to set up the run, and it's effective. And Matt Ryan is at a point now where he's in lockstep with his receivers. There are going to be more targets to go around because they don't have a tight end to speak of. No offense to the Falcons tight ends, like I can't say his name. I never can.
Levine Toilolo.
Thank you. Like he's fine. He's a guy. Whatever. You're not targeting him or wanting to make him exploit a matchup of some kind. So you're going to see a lot of slot receiver action out of Harry Douglas. If you held on to Harry Douglas this year, I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised with him as a wide receiver 3 on some weeks. And Julio and Roddy White would complement each other great. Huh?
Did you keep Harry Douglas this season?
I think you know that answer, and you can feel free to fuck yourself. I did not, because I did not see this kind of production coming from that offensive line, and I didn't see a scenario where Matt Ryan ended up playing a full 16 games effectively, and it looks like I'm going to be wrong there. So,
well, okay, let's back up a little bit. So, by the way, Jake Matthews is still out right now, so for all intents and purposes, he's not going to play in week 2. But it's 1 week, so you say that this means Matt Ryan's like return to greatness. You can't say that for week 1. All I'm going to say personally is it helps to have everyone healthy. And look, Roddy White looks like he's going to play in week 2, so he's good to go. Julio had no setbacks.
Okay.
I think having everyone healthy is the biggest thing there. And if they do, look, you got a shot every week, quite honestly. Julio Jones is awesome. He's really good. He's really good. So
really quick, so if Jake Matthews is out, who is starting at left tackle for the Falcons?
I have no idea. Does it matter?
Gabe Karimi. Yeah, it does.
Wonderful. Shotgun it all day. So. All right, what's next? Otherwise, we could go all night on. So.
I feel so bad for Matt Ryan. We'll take the happy note from the Falcons and just we'll turn that smile upside down and go to the Pats. How much of this game did you watch? I didn't get to watch a lot. I watched a little bit of it. I watched about 2 quarters in total.
I watched the complete meltdown of the Patriots towards the end. So, yeah, it wasn't. I mean, and given you and I are not one of those people that watches like tape every week and watches like every play 8 times, but it just seemed, quite honestly, like Brady was trying to force it into a lot of places that it just wasn't happening. And there was a lot of incompletions, obviously. I mean, hell, he had 54 pass attempts, and I think had a less than 50% completion rate. His yards per attempt was less than 5 yards. It just, and look, Gronkowski was in there for a third of the time, for snap counts anyway. I mean, it was a third between him, Tim Wright, and, Hunawani, or however you say it. So, now given, I think I think it'll help to have Dobson back. Dobson wasn't playing this game. All he had really, as far as the receiver position goes, was Edelman, who seems like the only guy he trusts, quite honestly. So I think having Dobson back will help, but man, it just looked ugly. It really did. And they did not run the ball at all. At all. And look, if you don't establish some run game, there's no reason for the defense to even look for that. I mean, they're not going to put 7 in the box. They're going to put 3 in the box, and they're going to have, a dime defensive formation and just plan for you to throw it every single time. So, yeah, man. And look, you and I talk about this. I'm a Brady owner in 2 Dynasty leagues, and I'm about ready to jump ship. So.
So there's a thing that I would say, and I would caution everyone to tread lightly when it comes to this, but mostly it seems like you can tell when a quarterback's about to go, when it's about to end for him. It's when he can no longer throw the deep ball, right? Same thing with a running back. When you can no longer break off 50-yarders, you sort of become limited in what you can do. And the same thing with a quarterback. They built an offense around his ability to throw horizontally, right? So, but there was always the ability, and you knew that he could at least throw deep if he had to. Even though the players weren't there, you could send Edelman on a 9-route or whoever, and you could at least know that there was a threat there. Now, not only do they not really have the players that can run those routes that are fast, I don't know that Brady can make those throws anymore. It kind of feels like he's not missing by a little bit, he's missing by a lot on all of his deep throws. And it started happening a little bit last year. And you saw part of it is they could pin their ears back, right? And part of it is that Cameron Wake is a man. He's awesome. But the other thing
and look, I think there is something to be said. The defensive line for Miami played really well. I mean, with Vernon and Wake, they pressured him a lot. So it's not like he had all day to throw. I will grant you that.
Yeah, man, I really hope that he's not going to be this limited. He actually had the lowest yards per attempt of any starting quarterback last week in the NFL.
Oh, I know. I know.
And that's with a 44-yard completion. So.
Well, okay. So here's the problem. As I see it. Okay, they're up 20-10 at halftime, right? You want to know how many times they ran the ball for the entire game?
20.
Yeah, because you're looking at it. But yes, 20 times. When you're leading, you were winning this game by 10 points, and you ran the ball 20 times total. I mean, look, even the Saints don't run it that little, right? And they're known as a pass-happy offense. But holy crap, you run it 20 times, which, look, apparently they just have no one there that they trust at all. And if you don't have that and opposing defenses know you're going to throw it, that makes the game plan a lot easier. I mean, look, let's face it. The Patriots did well last year down the stretch because, they gave it to LeGarrette Blount and he just pounded people and it was all good. But holy crap, you run it 20 times a game, right? You passed it 54. I mean, look, that's more than giving away to the defense what you're going to do, right?
Well, they've done that for years. I don't think that's that abnormal. It's just now that you've replaced your running game with a screen game and an underneath game, which they've done. That's not. That's what I didn't watch the game, and I wish I would have, because I could see at least how much the Dolphins cornerbacks are pressing up and where their linebackers are lining up. Because part of it is they don't respect the run game, and that's fine. But the other part of it is you can't replace a run game with a horizontal game like that if you have no. Like, their fastest player is their tight end, coming off knee surgery and arm surgery. That's not good, at all. So maybe Dobson helps. Maybe he's the speed guy that takes a little bit of pressure off these underneath routes, but they got to have that guy. That guy has to exist on that roster. I don't know that it does. The running game, I think, can be fixed. I mean, the only guy on that roster that can do it is Ridley. I think the offensive line's a bit of an issue, especially when you get rid of a starter a week before the season and Logan Mankins. So I would say I'm not very optimistic in Brady being able to turn it around at a large rate. to sort of the beginning of a small decline. What he would look like back when he first started in the league. Almost a game manager type that gets him in the right situation. Way more value in real life than in fantasy. And so if you have the ability to cash in on him going forward just on name cachet alone, I would advise anyone to do it. Just anyone. Just do it. Because I don't know how much he has left at, he used to be a guaranteed 302 TDs every week. That ain't happening, folks. That's not a thing anymore at all.
Yeah. No, I agree. And it's very, I guess it's disappointing because, I viewed him as really a value pick because, look, even with our rankings, which, by the way, is only an aggregation of other website rankings, he was at 13, right? Which, look, I thought could be a pretty good value because 13 means you're like at quarterback 2 level, which, hey, if Brady's your backup, that's great, but it's just not, it doesn't look good. It just really doesn't. And given it's 1 week, so I don't think I'm not ready to write him off yet, quite honestly, quite like Romo, only because Romo's got the injury problems that persist. Brady, it seems like it's I don't know what you want to call it, a personnel problem maybe? I don't know, but yeah.
It's a philosophy. It's a philosophy melded with personnel, right? They want to do things I don't think their personnel are capable of. The right hand can't help the left hand. So if they start to change a few things and help him out a little bit, fine. But I also think there's an issue that he can't throw the deep ball anymore. When you can't do that,
well, and not only that, but if you don't have someone you can trust with the deep ball, then you can't do it. I mean, look.
That's part of it, sure.
2007, who did he have for the deep ball?
Randy Moss.
Randy Moss.
He was great.
One of the greatest receivers of all time, quite honestly. So it wasn't that hard. But since then, it's been really difficult to be able to do that. And I agree with you. If you don't have an option to throw it deep, there's no reason for the defense to play that way. They're going to play you underneath all day, every day. And given they're still very good at that. I mean, look, Edelman will get his 9 catches for like 40 yards all day, but it doesn't mean it'll mean touchdowns. You know what I mean?
I think we kind of answered our own question, right? The only time in his career Tom Brady statistically has been good at deep throws is when he's had the best deep receiver in the game. So
sure, and that goes for anyone. You've got to have someone on the other end to catch that.
Yeah, kind of.
But no, I agree with you. And until they get someone that I think can handle the deep ball, I'm selling, quite honestly.
I don't blame you. So let's take we had a good thing with the Falcons. We have a sad thing with the Pats possibly. So let's go into something that we both kind of had questions on with someone you wanted to talk about. And I don't blame you. It's Julius Thomas because ironically we didn't talk about this before, but we both kind of had the same questions, and I thought this when I was watching it. So what do you kind of feel about his future? How do you feel about him in general?
Well, I think anytime someone is in an artificially good offense like Denver, you have to be concerned about what they can do outside of that offense, right? So with Thomas, going into last year, let's face it, until the last week or two before the season, nobody had ever heard of him at all, right? People got him with some really late round picks. And it worked out. Look, he ended up making the Pro Bowl, and he was, Peyton Manning's like number 3 option and a very good offense, so he was very good. And then obviously after week 1, it's like, holy crap, he's like going to be the best tight end in the league, which for this year, yeah, maybe. I still think probably that guy is going to be your better option. But so for dynasty purposes, and you and I sort of touched on this, you have to look at, A, is he going to be in that offense for the foreseeable future? And B, could he function without it, quite honestly? Because I think there's some real questions on if he can or not. And look, he's a free agent after this year. They haven't re-signed him yet, which to me is a big red flag, meaning it's very possible they think they can throw anyone in there and do just as well. Which, if you're a Julius Thomas dynasty owner, should scare the crap out of you, right? Because if they let him go, look, there's a lot of factors that go into if they re-sign him or not, but if they let him go and he goes to any other team in the league, you have to question if he can keep that kind of production up, because unless you're in a Peyton Manning offense that throws it 40 times a game, he's not going to keep it up. And, it's not like he entered the league like as hot shit and they thought, oh no, he's like a game changer, right? He's not. He's a very average build tight end that, I don't know if he can do the same things he can do without Peyton Manning. So, I think it's a situation to monitor very, very closely, and if you get to the trade deadline of your Dynasty League or even the end of the season and he hasn't re-signed yet, I think it's probably time to ship him out, right?
Yeah, so you kind of hit on one of the points I was going to talk about, and then I trust NFL evaluating more than most people, unless something drastically changes about the person, right? So coming out of college, a lot of it was that he played basketball. He wasn't a football player, so I get that. He's incredibly raw. But a lot of the other things that bothered him about, like, scouts had an issue with his size, his bulk, his lack of playing reps. The only thing that's really changed is his reps, and he plays with Peyton Manning. He's still not a giant tight end. He still can't block for shit. He's one of the worst blocking tight ends in the league, if they even make him do it on a play-to-play basis. Like, it's just not what he does. So he's very limited in what he's able to do. So he has to go to the right team that will never ask him to block. Now, that didn't really exist except for, like, there in New Orleans, basically. The only thing he scored in the top 10% of his class was in the vertical, which you would expect from a basketball player. He had a 35.5-inch vert. He ran a 4.7 for a tight end, not great. Only put up 16 reps in the bench, not great. Broad jump was right at 111 inches, again, not great. He was the definition of a slightly above average athlete who had no idea how to play football. And when your problems are you don't know how to play football, Peyton Manning expedites a lot of your learning curve. You're seeing it with Cody Latimer, too, with the reports in camp, etc. Like, Peyton Manning, it's cliche to say, and there's no way to prove it, but other than these people come in with no experience or lacking experience playing in a real offense or big-time football, and all of a sudden they just look great. Because Peyton Manning tells them, listen, just go do this and I'll make you look good. And then they do.
Yeah. So, Brandon Stokely, hello.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't... It's not a knock on Julius Thomas and saying that he's an awful tight end. I just don't see him being anything other than mid-range from here on out in his career. And so what I was saying before we got on the podcast a little bit is that whatever your trade deadline is this year, or if you're able to trade like a week after the season is over, because two things are going to happen, right? Like, either Julius Thomas isn't going to get signed and he's going to go somewhere else and the shine comes off, or Peyton Manning decides this is his last year and he's done. If one of those two things happened, you're kind of screwed. So as long as you can trade Julius before one of those two things happens, whenever you think it is, okay, that's the key here. Like, use your own sensibilities. But I would tend to think there's a better chance of him either A, moving on, or B, Manning retiring at the end of this year than there is any other year. So I wouldn't be shocked to trade him for a first or a first and a second, or someone trying to make a run and getting rid of him and moving on.
Well, look, you have to look at it this way. When is his value going to be higher, right? Mm-hmm. Yep. Probably not any more than right now, because it's sort of like in any, like, well, let's say baseball or even basketball for example, that those really good players that they're like, well, okay, Kevin Love. Let's take Kevin Love. He's leaving. He's not going to be there after next year. So what does Minnesota do? They're trying to figure out, okay, we can either trade him now and get some value because he's still going to produce for whomsoever, or we can wait and pray that he resigns, right? Mm-hmm. So that's essentially what Julius Thomas dynasty owners, that's the situation they're in. They can either trade him now for a haul, which I think we could agree the Kevin Love trade was a haul, or you can wait and gamble and hope that he's going to stick around. And, I think it's about 50-50 that he sticks around, one, and two, like you said, it's not a given Peyton's going to be back next year or even the year after that, right?
Yeah, there's just so much.
If they win it all this year, what's to say he doesn't go out on top and goes, "Hey, everyone, it's been real. I'm out." So I'm with you. Like, if this were a redraft podcast, Julius Thomas would be, bordering on the top tight end possible. But for dynasty leagues, Yeah, I'm with you. I think this year is probably the last year he's going to be performing at this level, and if you can get a significant haul for him, you definitely should. You really should.
I agree. I agree. There's so much in the air there. Like there's so much going on, and
Right.
I would prefer more stability. And you're going to get a lot for him because he's young, or at least
Right.
relatively to other tight ends.
Well, and look, I would even argue that guys like Ertz or hell, even Ebron might be better long-term prospects because you know they're going to be there and you know they're going to be a part of the offense.
Yeah.
Look, I'm convinced that Peyton, before every game, like picks out a guy and is like, you know what, I'm just going to feed you the ball like 8 times.
I know he does. Yeah.
And look, that's what he did with Julius in week 1, and
Yep.
it worked. It was very effective. Believe me, I have Julius in multiple leagues. It was fantastic. But
Yeah. All you have to do is look at the Chiefs games from last year and what he did to Marcus Cooper to know that he picks one guy in the defense and says, "All right, where are you?
right.
You're my bitch. Whoever's guarding you is gonna have a great day." Like it's not. Yeah, we know he does that. So
Right. So yeah, I would say the only guy on the Denver offense that is truly untouchable besides Peyton would be Demaryius, and Julius he's not untouchable. He's just not. But
Yep.
anyway, all right. So we've covered week 1 and 2. Let's cover, Jonathan, this week's position rankings, which we have at quarterbacks. So, I usually like to cover like the top 5 just, to see if there's any change. There's not. I mean, you've got Rodgers, Luck, Newton, Stafford, and Breeze in that order. Do you have any problems with that?
I mean, no.
Well,
It's really hard
so-
to get indignant about anyone in the top 5, right? Like it's
Sure.
really-
Well, and let me say this, and because this might come as a surprise to you. You and I have talked about this. I have not been an Andrew Luck fan, well, ever, quite honestly. I never got it. Like, even in, I remember a couple years ago in Dynasty startup leagues where Luck was honestly rivaling Aaron Rodgers for the #1 overall pick, which I didn't quite understand. But, and even his #2 ranking up to this point, I didn't get. But after week 1, I think I might be a believer, quite honestly. I think I might be okay with Luck being in that top 5 now.
Yeah, I was more of a believer than you just because, like, look, you can only bang your head against the wall so many times until you run out of blood in your head, right?
Sure.
And that's kind of what's happening here. Like, you can only hand the ball off so many times to Trent Richardson and Ahmad Bradshaw until you realize 2.4 yards a carry is not it's not an efficient way to run an offense, right? And it may suck. It may go against everything that you have as your quote unquote identity and being tough and physical. But when your running backs on offensive line kind of suck, let your best player have the ball, okay? And we're getting there. Not only that, but I think this year especially, you're going to see like the roses off the bloom for these Colts. They're not a good team. And good teams are going to put it to them early. And they can be picked on. And they're going to be throwing from behind a lot. So I think this is the year you see fantasy-wise that all that hype you thought of that you didn't see is going to start coming together. The other thing is he doesn't miss games ever. He never misses a game because he's so damn big it's impossible to hurt him. And he does run. He's a very good athlete. So there's value there.
Yeah, no, like I said, I'm not gonna say like I'm completely turned the tide, but I think there definitely, hopefully, is potential that they cut him loose in a good way, right?
Also, something that wasn't worth breaking down as an entire segment, but Matthew Stafford going forward, if Jim Caldwell actually does get him on the move more, get him outside the numbers, and let him use his athletic ability on the run, and then let those receivers who are Calvin Johnson and Golden Tate, who's a former running back, sort of play backyard ball a little bit and survive off broken plays, he could be really, really good this year.
No, I agree. That offense is going to be ridiculous.
Yeah, I could see him jumping ahead of Newton and maybe even Luck because you got to remember Stafford is only a year older than both of them.
Well, okay, so let's talk about that. Personally, I would put Stafford above Newton and Luck as far as Dynasty goes. He's only 1 year older than both of them, right?
Yeah.
I really would. He's got better weapons. I mean, that offense, they build it around Stafford. Not to say they don't around Cam or Luck, but even more so around Stafford. So Yeah, I would be. I would. Let's put it this way. I would be way more comfortable with Stafford as my dynasty quarterback than Luck or Newton at this point.
That's
I
fine.
really would.
That's kind of why I threw up my hands and said, meh, whatever, because you could talk me in any one of those top five, and I'd be like, all right, fine. Like, I'm
Right.
not going to argue about any of them because they all make sense.
Right.
Now, from 6 to 10, holy shit.
Yeah. So let's talk about that.
Like,
So sick, and just so people know, this is an aggregation of other websites' rankings, not our personal rankings. But so you got Nick Foles 6, Russell Wilson 7, Peyton Manning 8, Matt Ryan 9, Robert Griffin 10. Okay, so let's just hit them one by one, and let's try to keep it brief. Nick Foles 6, yay or nay?
add 10 to that. Go.
Well, that's fair. Okay, well.
So Chris
Okay.
Brown of Smart Football, who works at Grantland, he posted a few things on Twitter this week and showed the amount of yards and touchdowns that Foles left on the field this week, just from him being incompetent, not from him doing anything else in that. He missed about 3 touchdowns on 180 yards on 4 plays alone, just because he couldn't see whatever he wanted to see, right? And this has been the thing about Nick Foles from day one, that the fear of, does the system make him? And we're starting to see that more and more now that other people are catching on. It's obvious the system is making this guy. It's only a matter of time until Chip Kelly finds someone that he trusts more, and Foles is gone. That's my issue with Nick Foles. For the next year or two, he's fine. The second he finds someone he wants better, dump him. God, get rid of him.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with all of that. I think there is something to be said about young quarterbacks that you know are going to be around a while. Now, and like we talked about offline, would I take him in Dynasty over, say, Peyton Manning or Matt Ryan? No, I probably wouldn't. Would I take him above, like, Russell Wilson and Robert Griffin? Yeah, I probably would.
Maybe.
You know?
Even then, I would need convincing because I don't trust that Nick Foles is going to be there going into like next year. So.
And that's fine. But look, Robert Griffin for me, I would not touch him with a 10-foot pole in Dynasty. I really wouldn't. He scares the crap out of me. He really does.
That's fair. I think the reward's higher there. Like, I mean, the completion percentages and stuff were still good last week. It's a new offense with the.
They were, and yeah, that's not to say he didn't have a bad game. He had a decent game, but I just think there's more upside with a guy like Foles or Ryan or whatever.
So. Oh yeah, okay, so Matt Ryan should be number 6 in this list. Foles should be out. Griffin should be out. Kaepernick at 11 should be way higher. And even Peyton Manning at 8, I think, is too low. Like, I understand he's old, and I just talked about he could possibly retire at the end of this year. But if he doesn't and he plays next year, you get top 2 level quarterback play for 2 years running. And listen, flags fly forever, right? Dumb cliche to say. But if you have the ability to win your league because this quarterback's awesome and you only get it for 2 years, look, winning a league is on average about 8 years worth of injury into that league. Like, it's worth it for the money alone to guarantee you that title. So
right. Well, and so that's something we touched on before, which you know me just because we are in a couple leagues together, but I'm probably the more conservative guy out of anyone. And for dynasty leagues, look, I understand getting young guys and not getting old guys. I get all that, but if you've got a guy that's clearly above everyone else, like Peyton Manning, how is that not something you go after, or how is that not something that you want? Quite honestly, I don't. I just don't understand it. I really don't. Now, given I don't think he cracks the top 5 because I think those guys in the top 5, I think that makes sense. But would I put him at 6? Yeah, probably all day.
Yep. Again,
So,
recognize the value in front of you. That's all you got to do.
Right.
And it's
All
there.
right. So let's cover a couple things. So we got Sam Bradford. He drops from 22 to 27. And by the way, these can be found at our website, dynastyfantasyfootballcentral.com. He's 27 now. That's probably 3rd quarterback range in your dynasty team. Is he even worth that?
No.
Honestly.
Move on. Even if he stays with that team, Brian Schottenheimer is an awful offensive coordinator. He had Tavon Austin, running a power O scheme out of the I form yesterday. Like, the guy just doesn't get it. he's an idiot of an offensive coordinator. And if he goes somewhere else, it's going to be a team that is in dire need of everything. Like, you're not giving him the reins to a good football team. He's sort of in a no-win situation. I don't see a lot of redeemable ability fantasy-wise for Sam Bradford, which sucks because I liked him coming out of college.
Sure. No, I get that. But, yeah, I agree. I think he's probably done in St. Louis. They're going to move on. And, yeah, he would – believe me, I don't think he's going to find a starter's job next year. He'll be lucky to find a backup job somewhere. And – you know, he'll have to rebuild his career, quite honestly. But right, who else we got? Oh, my favorite, Jimmy Garoppolo, who was not ranked last week, up to 33rd. Thoughts?
Based on what? Like, I don't. On what? I don't get. I ironically talked about this earlier. What, because you are in the Patriots offense and you're the backup there, you just become good for some magical reason, unbeknownst to anyone else, right? This is how this works.
Well, okay. So I've thought about it. I've had some time to reflect. I agree with you. I think he's no different than the other, essentially, assembly line of quarterbacks they rolled out, whether it's Hoyer or Castle or now Mallett or whatever. So I'm with you there. I think the difference, and it's not a big difference, but it is a difference, is with every quarterback that comes along, Brady gets older, right? So I'm with you. I'm not saying Jimmy Garoppolo's like the next Joe Montana, but with every year that passes, that's another year on Brady, and it's closer to the time he's not going to be there anymore, quite honestly. So, and again, I'm not saying Garoppolo's like the answer, but it's very obvious that Belichick is a passing guy. Can we agree with that?
Up until the point he's not, yeah. I mean, he's Greg Popovich of coaching, right? Like, Greg Popovich was an inside-out guy. We're going to play slow, post-game free throws, etc. Up until the point he's not anymore. And that's the thing, right? Like, Belichick has shown he can do both things. Corey Dillon got 1,600 yards for this team.
Yeah.
I mean, so
I get that. I think it's always a safe play to have the backup to a quarterback that's especially this old. I mean, that's why Osweiler was ranked so highly still, is because Manning's 37, and at any point he could go. Now, it's not likely, but again, it's not unreasonable, I think.
That's fine. I would warn people that NFL teams aren't monarchs, and just because you're next in line for the throne doesn't mean you get it. So,
are you sure?
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I think, honestly, the only team to successfully pull that off was the 49ers with Montana and Young, and that was probably it. So
Packers, Favre to Rodgers.
Okay, no, I'd agree with that.
But that's about it, ever.
There's literally 2 in 20 years that were.
And you're talking about the number 1 overall pick in Steve Young sitting behind Joe Montana, and what should have been the number 1 overall pick in Aaron Rodgers sitting behind Brett Favre. It's safe to say that Jimmy Garoppolo and Brock Osweiler are not those people.
Right. Well, it's Hall of Famer replacing Hall of Famer.
Yeah. So if you want to have faith in those people, it's because you know something about their reports or et cetera that we don't. So
sure. All right. So lastly, we had another couple of drops. Matt Schaub, Ryan Mallett. Are they worth anything to you?
No, not at all. The Mallett thing is just window dressing because Savage isn't ready right now. We talked about this, like, Savage isn't on the list. I would rather have Savage ahead of Osweiler or Garoppolo because, like we just said, the only value to Garoppolo or Osweiler right now is that they're going to play soon, right? Well, I would argue that Savage is going to play sooner because at least we know that situation is going to be, like, there's going to be turnover next year. Ryan Fitzgerald is not that dude, and Brady and Manning still could be. So Savage is going to get every chance this year and going into next to play from day one. So if you're just desperate for an immediate return out of a young guy and hope you can hit, Savage is the guy to go after. Mallett's just there in case Fitzgerald goes down so someone else knows the offense. That's all he's there for.
Right. Now, and I'd agree with that. I think, Mallett owners were probably openly hoping for Fitzpatrick to completely fall on his face like week 1. But he didn't. They won. He didn't turn the ball over. So for I think he probably bought himself another month,
Yeah.
with that game. So, yeah, I'd agree with you. So, all right. Anything else you want to cover? By the way, Antonio Brown has a possible concussion, if anyone's wondering at home.
Yeah,
So
I saw that. I didn't want to kill your night. Sorry.
that's okay. That's okay.
Fuck out.
And I guess Dennis Pitta just well, not Dennis Pitta. Owen Daniels just vultured a tight end from Dennis Pitta, which is fine. That's
Touchdown, you mean?
yeah, I'll let that go.
Me.
So yeah. Anyway, anything else, Jonathan, before we sign off for tonight?
No, just going forward, we have the ability to record any game we want to. So if you guys have something you want us to look for, or really anything going forward with, like we said, we want to look into patterns of how people are being used to give us a better idea how they're going to be used going forward, what their value is. Something you guys want to see that we're not talking about or catching, by all means, shoot us on Twitter, hit us on the email, website, whatever. We'll do it for you.
Yeah, and it's like I've told multiple people this week. It's 1 week. Don't overreact just yet. I mean, a lot of crazy stuff happens week 1 that you don't expect, and honestly won't happen again. So,
It's
all
pretty
right.
accurate,
So
actually.
yes. So check us out on DynastyFantasyFootballCentral.com, and we will see you next time.